Since Valve seems fairly content to do what Valve's always been intent on doing, which is to say, spending years observing what their community wants them to work on next in regards to games, and then they end up doing the exact opposite. Hey, you want Half-Life free? Well, screw you. Take this spin-off VR game instead. You want a third Portal game? Screw you. We'll just include a short Portal sequence in our VR game, The Lab. You want more Team Fortress 2 major updates, or potentially a third game? Yeah, no, just keep buying cosmetics and don't even expect a major update, let alone a new game, from us in the near future, and you'll never be disappointed. This is not to say Valve has not been making good games lately, but just that Valve either doesn't understand what the community wants, or more likely is completely indecisive internally over what artistically would be the most interesting project to do. Whatever the reasoning for Valve's inactivity, there is no denying that Valve doesn't share the same interest in Team Fortress 2 in 2020 as they did in, say, 2012 or 2013. So it's fallen to the Team Fortress 2 community to keep the franchise alive. And that brings us to where we are today. Team Fortress 2 Classic was created in a manner similar to World of Warcraft Classic as a total conversion mod with the intent to effectively rewind the clock and rework the game into something more like how it was during its earliest days of development. Team Fortress 2 Classic has been known to be in development in some form, dating back as far as early 2014, with the initial release date for the mod projected to be December 2014. Needless to say, they did not meet that deadline. In fact, the team would continue to fail to meet another 4 years worth of deadlines until they began seriously straightening out their timetable. Part of the Team Fortress 2 Classic dev team, those working on the new deathmatch game mode for the mod, separated from the project, instead choosing to evolve that concept into its own independent game. With the seeming infighting and lack of focus regarding the game's content now resolved, the remainder of the team spent the next 2 years working on getting Team Fortress 2 Classic ready for release. Now, as of July 4th, 2020, it's finally out, so we can jump right in and see whether TF2C was worth the hype. Before we go any further, let's get the technical comments out of the way. The options menu contains lots of little goodies, with some carried over from TF2 itself, and others new to TF2C. I'll just go over a couple that I like to enable, but I'd recommend taking a closer look yourself when you have an opportunity. I like to turn on fast weapon switch, rather than relying on the number keys, as it's far more convenient and faster to scroll with a mouse wheel rather than press specific buttons on my keyboard. If you scroll down to play a hit sound every time you injure an enemy, I personally prefer to select the option reading special events, which in practice allows you to hear a specific sound effect to confirm you just dealt mini crit or crit damage to an enemy. In a firefight, it's sometimes not always possible to read damaged numbers, so I prefer to rely on my hearing just as much, if not more, than on my sight. Likewise, I enable the accumulate combat text damage into a single number option, as when you're a soldier, pyro, or heavy, dealing a lot of damage rapidly, it makes far more sense to see just how much damage you're dealing an enemy as one number rather than a slew of fast-moving and fast-disappearing numbers, and all that while trying to do the math in your head as you play. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to play that way. I also enable minimal HUD, as I don't know about you, I've always found TF2's default HUD to be unnecessarily massive, to the point of being clunky. Enabling minimal HUD will make the game look far better at 1080p or higher resolution, allowing you to focus on what's actually going on in-game, as opposed to letting the bottom and corners of your screen be unreasonably cluttered. Finally, I find TF2 Classic really shines when you enable beta, muzzle flash, and dynamic lighting for the flamethrower. Nothing says true orange box TF2 like seeing the classic stylish muzzle flash of Heavy's minigun. As like its mainstream predecessor, TF2 Classic is a multiplayer-only mod, so if you're expecting something along the lines of a single-player campaign, you're definitely going to be disappointed. Then again, I'm not sure why anyone with half a brain who ever played TF2 itself would expect anything in the vein of a single-player campaign. However, for those who would want to try the game out privately before going up against normal players, there is a workaround. Like TF2 itself, Team Fortress 2 Classic allows players to set up and host their own private or public server locally from their computer. As part of the quick and relatively painless process of setting up a TF2C server in-game, players can choose whether to enable bots in the server, and if so, how many bots to add. Unlike TF2, where bots had to be added manually, and oftentimes the game requiring players to manually generate navigation files in order for the bots to function properly, TF2 Classic bots are fully compatible with nearly every single map included in the game. I say nearly because there are one or two seemingly random outliers. Now, it's worth noting that the TF2 Classic team bragged a bit in their patch notes about how the game would be including a completely redesigned and improved bot AI system. However, I would greatly question whether it actually is all that much improved. There are some definite definite improvements, like bots very rarely glitching out and all clumping together in one single corner because they didn't think to just walk a few feet to their left or right to walk out the door. But there are other equally weird and noticeable bugs that I've never seen before in my 2,000 plus hours of playing Team Fortress 2 myself, and I can only assume are due to the bot AI changes that come with Team Fortress 2 Classic. Like disguised enemy spies not attacking engineers who are just hammering away at their stuff, instead choosing to just stand 2 feet behind engineer, staring at them soullessly, like Yandere Shan stares at Senpai. But between enabling bots on most of the TF2 Classic maps, and allowing them to carry random weapons to differentiate their loadouts a bit, I'm willing to let the occasional brain-dead spy glitch occur. Team Fortress 2 Classic has 3 different game modes: VIP, Domination, and 4-Team. All 3 game modes are fairly straightforward in design. In VIP, Blue Team needs to escort a single player or NPC across the map in order to capture various control points and ultimately the final objective. Red Team has to stop Blue Team from doing so, preferably by focusing on eliminating the VIP. The designated VIP character has a somewhat higher amount of health to compensate for their vulnerability and the fact that they cannot carry any primary or secondary weapon. The VIP does generally carry an umbrella, which acts as a backup melee weapon, but usually it's ideal for them not to engage in combat themselves and instead let their team do most of the fighting for them. Teammates remaining close to the VIP gain certain mini buffs, like dealing mini crits and seemingly a slight movement speed buff. Domination in Team Fortress 2 Classic is fairly similar to any domination mode seen in most other FPS games. Both teams compete to maintain majority control over a set number of control points. Control points will over time grant points to that team. The more control point objectives your team holds, the faster you acquire domination points. The match ends when one team reaches a total of 200 points. 4-Team isn't really its own mode as much as a modified version of existing modes. Simply put, it changes the normal 2-team formula into a 4-team mode, with players divided onto 4 sides: red, blue, green, and yellow. Also, it multiplies the total number of control points or capture points on each map to a total of at least 4. This understandably adds a little bit of chaos to each match, although personally it only really starts to get fun when you play on modded community servers that increase the normal default player cap beyond 32 to more like 64. If you've never played TF2 with 64 or more players and a fast respawn system, you're really missing out because it infuses the 4-team mode with a even more chaotic energy. So yeah, highly recommend giving that a go. It's one of those once-in-a-lifetime gaming opportunities. Along with these game modes comes 10 new TF2 Classic exclusive maps, 5 original maps, and 2 reworked versions of official Valve-made maps. These maps include a Marinth, I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly, if not, God help me, whatever. A normal capture point mode map designed originally as a TF2 community map, but reworked for TF2 Classic. Flask, a 4-team compatible arena map. Kashpa, a remade version of the original Team Fortress Classic map. Hydro, reworked into a 4-team domination mode map. Fort, a 4-team capture the flag variant of the original Team Fortress Classic version of 2 Fort. Oil Canyon, a normal domination map, and then we have Badwater Basin, Blackstone Harbor, Lionside, and Trainyard, all VIP mode maps. Now for those feeling a little put out by the idea of being forced to only play on these maps using stock TF2 weapons, fear not, 15 new TF2C exclusive weapons have been added to the game. These weapons being a mixture between original Valve prototypes for weapons ultimately not included in the game, and some being just completely new concepts made by the TF2 Classic team, inspired by Valve's art style and weapon design philosophy. Some of the original TF2 beta items now being included in Team Fortress 2 Classic include the Scout's nail gun, which fires an automatic spray of nails at enemies, dealing damage on impact. The Soldier's RPG launcher, which fires slower than his normal rocket launcher and has less spray damage, but deals more damage on direct hits. The Demo Man's dynamite pack, where he throws a single pack that then bursts into many smaller dynamite charges, which all then explode at once moments later. Spy now has his old tranquilizer gun back, which now color-blinds anyone shot by it and reduces their turning speed by 50% for 5 seconds. Sniper likewise has a fish whacker back, which deals a bleed effect on victims on hit, then deals critical damage to any player experiencing said bleed effect, but this is offset by the fact Sniper is marked for death while using this weapon, so it's a high-risk, high-reward type weapon. Other new weapons designed specifically for TF2 Classic include the Hunting Revolver, a new primary weapon for Sniper, which basically looks like a pistol retrofitted to look like a sniper rifle, which increases the max health of the player and has a 60% faster firing speed compared to the Sniper's default sniper rifle, but has the drawback of being unable to charge shots to deal more damage, as was the case with the default sniper rifle. Then we have the Mine Layer, a new secondary for Demo Man, which has the rather useful attribute of automatically detonating all placed explosives when an enemy player is within range, at the cost of a reduced clip size and a reduction in how many mines can be placed down at once. The Medic now has a new melee weapon, the Shock Therapy, which can fully heal any friendly teammate back to full health in one hit. This is contrasted by a 30-second cooldown. Also, it deals critical damage to any enemy players underwater. Finally, we have the Coil Gun, a new secondary pistol for Engineer which fires laser beams of energy at players, and has both a primary and secondary mode. Holding down left click will cause it to fire like a normal pistol. Holding down the right mouse will charge up a single shot, dealing more damage on impact and allowing the bullet to excitedly bounce off walls like flubber. To top off these new additions, 6 new weapons will be returning from TF2, including the Huntsman for Sniper, the Crits Krieg Uber Sprites for Medic, the Flare Gun for Pyro, the Gunboats for Soldier, and of course Heavy's beloved sandwich, because God forbid we have a TF2 game or a Team Fortress game in general without a sandwich to top it off. Now to get to the real meat of the video, no pun intended Heavy, what's my takeaway of TF2 Classic? Well, to be blunt, what is here is great, but there's just not enough here in the first place. Where TF2 Classic really shines is in its original game modes and accompanying maps, as well as the new and beta-inspired character weapons. They're all truly fantastic, almost Valve quality, and I sincerely mean that. But it seems like TF2 Classic as a mod is either afraid to or unwilling to fully distinguish itself from TF2 as a game. I honestly wish they decided to make a admittedly bold creative decision and just not include a single Valve-made map in TF2 Classic, and instead only focus on those maps that they made themselves, as well as the maps that Valve made but then the team retrofitted for other modes, like what they did with 4Team. The bloated number of maps in games, the overwhelming majority being official TF2 maps that the TF2 Classic team had no involvement in making, makes it at times really hard to identify those maps that are new and original to the game. I would rather see TF2 Classic have a limited initial map pool of 10 or 12 maps, rather than waste time making nearly every stock TF2 map bot compatible and optimizing them for TF2 Classic play. Quality over quantity, and that seems to be a concept more or less lost on the TF2 Classic team. There's nothing wrong with narrowing your focus now and then when designing a game. Not everything requires a broad stroke. When Overwatch first came out, some news websites and YouTubers began complaining that there weren't enough maps in the game at launch. Yet the actual player base, those actually playing it, not just those looking at it as a means to make content, didn't begin leaving the game in droves, as would be the case with nearly any game players didn't feel had enough content to warrant continued play. Players mostly stuck around with the game beyond the initial hype because the maps were so well designed from both a visual and game design perspective that the game's replay value remained very high despite the media perceived lack of content. Quality almost always wins out over quantity. In the past few years, Overwatch has more or less doubled its total number of maps, to the point that some maps and modes have to be restricted to being seasonal content. Any game, if given time and the right dev team behind it, can add more content down the road, so I'd rather quality be given the priority seat over quantity. TF2 Classic hopefully will have a bright future ahead of it, but a lot of that depends on how soon the next major update releases and what's included in it. The developers promise more updates are on the way, although no roadmap has been revealed yet. So right now no one can really tell how long we're going to have to wait until we get to see what's next. All I can say is hopefully the next update doesn't take another 4 to 6 years to release. If you're curious to find out more about Team Fortress 2 Classic, you can find out more about the project on its website, tf2classic.com, where the full 1.0 release patch notes can be found, as well as pretty much anything else you'd want to know about the mod and its developers. On that note, that's where I'm going to wrap up this video for today. If you like this video, consider hitting the like button and tell me what you think of TF2 Classic in the comments down below. People always seem surprised that I respond to comments posted on my channel, but yeah, I generally do. So if you're ever looking to chat or get my attention, posting a comment is probably the best way of doing so. If you enjoy what I do, I produce new game review videos roughly every 10 to 12 days, roughly 3 videos a month. So if you want to stay in the loop when a new video goes live, consider subscribing and hitting the bell to get notified when a new video is released. Currently, my channel is on the verge of hitting 675 subscribers. Hopefully it will by the time this video goes live. And I do like my milestone, so hey, every ounce of support helps. This is WarriorDan signing out. Stay awesome, everybody, and peace out. Stay safe, everyone.